years ago. Now, before I do get started, does anybody have any questions for me so far? No, 200 years of history in half an hour. I covered everything. All right, fair enough. I'm a hell of a guy. No question about that. All right, so on a boat, we covered the beginning of the War of 1812. America invaded Canada 3 years in a row. We got our butts kicked 3 years in a row. The British end up invading Washington, D.C., burned D.C., tried to burn Baltimore. That's where we got the national anthem. Then they headed south towards New Orleans. Jackson shows up in New Orleans, November of 1815, makes a deal with asks for volunteers, gets them, makes a deal with Lafitte. Then they have the Battle of Lake Borgne over there. The middle radio tower, the one kind of bites off the distance, that's the edge of Lake Borgne. That's where we sent 5 ships to stop 42, and they failed. All right, so we covered that on the boat, and now we're up to that point. The British began hiding deep in the swamps. We don't know where they are. Jackson sends out some scouts. The scouts are unsuccessful. This would have gone on longer if not for the actions of one young British aristocrat. This young man did not like being cold and wet on Christmas. He thought because he was an aristocrat, it's his God-given right to be warm and dry, even though all of his men were cold and wet, which is an absolutely horrible leadership philosophy, but that's what this guy believed. So he and some of his friends dig out of the swamp. They take a house. Not that one. That house does not exist for another 20 years. It was just a summer home when this was a plantation. It's been abandoned for quite some time. It's all falling apart. It's all fake anyway, so don't worry about it. The house they took was about 8 miles that way. They thought it was Christmas Eve and they were going to get a big dinner. They were wrong. It was December 23rd. They missed it by a day. They kick open the door of the house. The guy that owned the house surrendered immediately. The son of the owner does not. He runs out the back door, jumps onto a horse, rides hell-bent for leather all the way to the French Quarter. He finds Andrew Jackson. Tells him, I know where the British are. Let's go. Let's get them. Now, you can say a lot of things about Andrew Jackson as a president. Some very, very bad. And a few good things. But whatever else he may or may not have been as a president, Andrew Jackson was an absolutely excellent soldier. When he finally learns where the British are, Jackson reacts immediately, even though it's the middle of the night. By God! They will not sleep on our soil! He yells. I can only do that once a day. And then he attacks. At night, in the dead of night, a moonless night, half in and half out of the swamp. This was not a formal Napoleonic-style battle, where everybody lines up at perfect roads and shoots each other till one side runs away. This was chaos. Pistols at close range, cutlasses in the dark. The Americans pushed the British off the little toehold they had gained, and then Andrew Jackson brings all of his men back here. This is where he chose to defend New Orleans, because of that ditch. All right, so quick side note about geography. The British are several miles that way. The French Quarter, meaning all of New Orleans at the time, several miles that way. This is the high ground. You're literally looking at all of it. On the other side of that tree line right now is a road and apartment complex. But back then, that was an absolutely massive swamp. So this is a choke point. They're going to have to march alongside this strip of ground, and that canal existed. Jackson puts all of his men on this side of the canal and sends them to digging deeper, wider, longer. They run the canal all the way from the river into the swamp itself. So now there's no longer any ground for the British to march upon. They dig the canal 15 feet wide, 8 feet deep. That is too far for a normal human being to jump. That is too deep for a normal human being to cross without getting everything completely soaking wet. And this is the era of black gunpowder. And if your gunpowder gets wet, it will not explode. And if your gunpowder will not explode, that means you are no longer carrying a musket, you are now carrying a club. So the water barrier is actually a very formidable obstacle back then. They can take all the mud, anything else they can find, piled on this side of the canal. 5 feet high, 20 feet thick. That is the perfect height to stand behind and fire at the British without exposing your body to gunfire. It is 20 feet thick because nothing is going to punch through 20 feet of dirt. Not back then. Not even a cannon fired directly on point is going to punch through 20 feet of dirt. So between the canal they cannot cross and the rampart they cannot shoot through, this is an extremely defendable position for the Americans, a very, very difficult assault for the British. Everything that is about to happen was shaped and defined by the limitations of the technology available to them at the time. I'm not going to explain why all these things are true. I will speed through it because of expediency. If you want to argue with me about it later, feel free to do so. But here are the big 3 issues. Number 1, black gunpowder cannot get wet. Second issue, smoothbore muskets firing musket balls, literally impossible to aim. I don't care what you think you've seen on TV and the movies. It is literally impossible. No one can do it at any skill level. Third issue, muzzle-loading weapons. Not quick and not easy. If you are very good, and the British are, you will fire 3 times in a minute. If you are not good, and the Americans aren't, twice in a minute. If you're very bad, and that would be most of the volunteers who've never done this before, it may take you a full minute to reload that weapon. That is a huge limitation if you're in open ground. It's not as big of a deal if you're behind 20 feet of dirt, because all the American is going to do is this. And now he's totally safe. Even if it takes a full minute to reload that weapon, nothing is going to hit him when he's doing it. When he's ready to fire, it is a total waste of time to aim, so he does not try. This is what the American is going to do. He's going to reload at an angle, he's going to get ready to fire, he's going to go 1, 2, 3, bang, and back down. You're going to expose your head for a fraction of a second. This means it's going to be damn near impossible for the British to actually hit anything. The way the British have dealt with these limitations is, skipping towards the very end, there's 3 rows of soldiers with a guy behind them on horseback telling him exactly what to do. First rank fire, kneel, reload. Second rank fire, kneel, reload. If the guy behind them is not there yet,